Okay, with step 3 here, we're going to use the Excel's recommended pivot table features, which allows us to easily explore data from many different perspectives, which is a few clicks. Once you've created your pivot table, you can easily modify it to improve your readability and even change to further explore the data you have. If you recall, a pivot table is really just a table of statistics that summarizes your data of that table you've created by transforming your columns of your table into new rows and new columns, and then group that data with various statistical processes that you desire. And really just doing a pivot table is the only way to really understand a pivot table. And you'll probably create many pivot tables in the industry. So it tells us exactly what it wants us to do here. And if we look at our directions, we're just going to use the data on the sales data worksheet. We're going to go to the recommended pivot table button. It's on the insert tab. And then once we click that, we're going to scroll down so we get to the average of cash discounts by quantity pivot table. So let's go ahead and jump on over to our data. Make sure we switch back over to our sales data, and I'm just going to click here just to make sure it knows where I'm at. And then we're going to go to, just like it told us, we're going to go to our insert tab, and we'll see here in our tables group here, recommended pivot tables. Click that, and now you'll see it gives us a name of each of these. Sum of gross revenue, sum of net revenue. What it told us that it wanted us to use was the average of cash discount. So scroll down and read on your left. There's average of coupon and average of cash discounts by quantity. So we're going to go ahead and hit the OK button, and Excel will take our database and create a new worksheet where we have a new pivot table. So rather than us creating a new worksheet, copying the data we want, then doing the calculations, creating a pivot table allows it to do it for us and saves us a lot of time and effort in creating our new data set to be able to see how we use some of the basic functions that we want to use for statistics. Rather than us doing it ourselves, it does it for us. So if we scroll down and see what it needs us to do here in the rest of step 3 is now you're in a configure pivot table options, so that those error values that we've seen there after the pivot table is created show as 0. So jump back over there and let's fix that real quick. Here are those errors that we see. So to fix this, it's going to be pretty easy. We're going to go to our Analyze tab here. Once you click on your Analyze tab, you'll see that you have some different options. So we're going to look up our pivot table here. Here's our pivot table options. Drop this down, click Options, and in the Format group here, for error values, so we're going to check that, and what it wants us to do is it wants us to just see a value of 0 wherever there's an error. So we'll hit OK there, and those errors have now been corrected. Now in cell A4, we're going to replace our row labels with quantity sold, and in cell B3 we're going to replace the column labels with cash discount. So row labels here in cell A4, just type in the words quantity sold, and then up here in B3 where it says column labels, do exactly what it said, and that is just to type in the words cash discount ? Alright, so we've done that. Now it wants us to remove the cash discount field from the values area and replace it with the total discounts field. So if we look over here, our cash discounts here in our values field, we're going to remove that, and then we're going to replace it with total discounts. So go ahead and remove cash discounts and replace it with total discounts. Now that you have that done, move on to our next step. Rename your worksheet to the following label: total discounts by quantity. So I'm going to double click or right click and rename. It's up to you. I'm just going to double click, rename it, hit the enter key, and now that worksheet has been given a logical name. That should be it for step 3. Let's go ahead and take a look at step 4. Scroll on down here. I talked about how a pivot table is just an interactive table that extracts, organizes, and summarizes your source data. And they're used for data analysis, which I mentioned before, and we're going to look for trends and patterns in our data so that we can make better business decisions. If we start seeing trends that are going away we don't like, then maybe we need to make some adjustments. So this is why we say it's a statistical tool, and it's a predictive analysis tool. And the first step in creating a pivot table is to select the data to be used and the location where it's to be saved, which we have done. So we're going to use the data once again in our sales data Excel table. We're going to create a new pivot table on a new worksheet, and we're going to name this new worksheet Pivot Analysis. So once again, go over to your sales data worksheet. I've already got a cell that's active, cell A3, and we're going to go ahead and do exactly what it said, and that's to use this data to create a new pivot table on a new worksheet called Pivot Analysis. So we'll go up here to our Insert tab, Tables Group, Pivot Table, and it's going to be a new worksheet. We'll hit OK, and we will call this Pivot Analysis. So double click, Pivot Analysis. And that should be it for step 4. Now we've got that created, let's look at step 5 here. And in step 5 we're going to see how the net revenue breaks down into various groups can be easily done with our pivot tables. Now that we've created our pivot table, we're going to, our worksheet, we're going to create a pivot table that displays the net revenue values with our transaction dates field grouped into years, quarters, and months as rows, and the payment type as our columns. So we'll see the different payment types as our columns, then our rows of data underneath that will come from this data here. So we're going to use the club member field as our report filter and only show the data for the club members. So let's go ahead and jump back over to our table and create this pivot table that displays our net revenue values and trans date fields grouped into years, quarters, months as our rows, and our payment types as the columns. Alright, so now we are back on our worksheet, and we're going to click on our net revenue and our transaction date fields. And we can see that we now have some data that's listed over here. And then we're going to have our transaction date fields grouped into years, quarters, and months as rows, and the payment type as our columns of data. I should probably click on the transaction date instead of the transaction ID. There we go. Now that looks a lot better. Alright, now we're going to right click a data cell under our row labels. So let's just right click here. Now that we've right clicked here, we are going to look at what we've got here for our grouping of our data. So I'm going to click group here. And you can see now it's listed as dates and months, but the direction says it wanted us to be in quarters, years, and months. So I'm going to deselect days, and I'm going to go ahead and hit OK, leave the dates as auto default. And now we can see all of our data for 2022, and we've got our fourth quarter data listed here. So we've broken it up in by months, years, and quarters. The next part of the direction said that we need to add the payment type to our columns area. So just go simply click and drag this to the columns area here in our pivot tables field. And now we can see the different payment types as our header row or our columns of information, and we can see the net revenue for each of those payment types by month, quarter, and year, which is gives us some very useful data to look for trends and see which payment types are being used most, and different little things we can just do as a business manager to take our data and make it into useful information. You can see the last thing it wants us to do is to use the club member question mark field as the report filter and only show the data for club members. So if we go back over here, we're going to do exactly what it said. So the club member question mark field, we're going to drag that down here to our filters area. Now you can see that is listed up here, and we want to make sure that we only see the data club members. So we're going to drop this down. We're going to see we have no or yes. We obviously want to click yes. Hit OK, and we can see our data changes a little bit because we are filtering only those people who are club members. So if we go back over to our sales data worksheet here, and we look and see which people are club members, you can see that some are selected as yes, some are no. So we're only pulling the data where our club member category is selected as a yes value. And we can see that's why our data is a little bit more limited than what it was prior to us adding this filter. So let's go back to our directions. That's it for step 5. Now we're going to look at step 6, where pivot tables can be made more user-friendly and provide additional insights into our data through various pivot table configuration options. We're going to create a total net revenue custom name for the sum of net revenue field, and we're going to format that field as accounting with 2 decimal places. So let's go ahead and take care of that right now. Now we'll go back to our directions, change the pivot table so that it shows the total net revenue as a percentage of our grand total, and we're going to apply a pivot table style. We're going to apply the white pivot style light 23 to our pivot table. And the last thing we're going to do here is to change our pivot table so it shows the total net revenue. So let's do that. We're going to do this. This is a very quick change. We're just going to go into our data, right click on it, and change this to a total net revenue as a percentage of grand total. So we go back to our worksheet. We're going to right click in our fields here, and we're going to show our values as a percentage of grand total. You can see all of our data gets converted into a percentage now. So now we can tell what percentage of our grand total was in December for them of a payment type of Apple Pay. We could see that cash, there was no cash use for our total in quarter 4. So we can just now make different analysis of the same data in a different way. A lot of this information becomes helpful when you're creating executive summaries for executives of the company, so they can see how a percentage breakdown occurs in, for this one, our total net revenue for the quarter and for the year. Now that we did that part, we'll do that last part for our formatting of applying the white pivot style light 23 to our pivot table. So we're going to go up here to our design tab, and we're going to drop down in our pivot table styles group, and we'll hover over these and see how their names change. You can see we wanted a pivot style, a white pivot style light 23, and that's this one right here. So I'll click that, You can see how the changes get made, and you can see that as you hover over them, how the changes get made. But this is how we want this one to look. Once again, it's the white pivot style light 23. That's it for this step, and I will continue with our step number 7 in the next video.